Hi, everybody. Just work out a couple things. I did good, but then I didn't do good. Um, and lighting. Let there be light. Yeah, I can. No, I'm not going to do that. So that's just the way this is going to be right now. Sure. I meant to turn on the light. So give me a second here. Yeah, pro. I did not say I was consummate professional. I never said that. I refuse to even say that. Yeah, no professionals were harmed in the making of this at all. Anyway, so for those of you who are just tuning in, welcome. And my name is Beth Wagner, and I am currently reading my dad's manuscripts. This one is, and I'm editing them. This one I'm doing a little bit differently because this is the original manuscript. It was not written on a computer because they didn't, computers were just coming into being around this time. So, yes, there were computers, but they weren't coming into home use until right about this year, like the year that of this being written, finished up being written. So it was, I believe, typed on an electrical typewriter. And so I'm reading each chapter, scanning it in. Then I have to translate it all into OCR. It's a whole big thing. Anyway, but that's not why you're here. You are here to hear stories, not stories about the stories. Anyway, so this is Guardian of the Sword. It is the 1982 version. There was another version that you look right there, the blue book. That is the 1977 version, which I didn't really realize. I didn't really think about the 1982 version until after I published that one. So now I'm reading the 1982 version to see whether to amalgamate the two of them or whether to maybe do a special edition of the 1982 version. So I'm going to continue reading it and let me know what you think. I'm currently on chapter 21. So if you're just tuning in tonight, please go back to the past broadcasts in order to listen to the first part of the story. Because really, at this point, we're kind of wrapping up here. So you do owe yourself the favor to go back to listen to the first part to get to where we are now. But so without further ado, chapter 21. The Hygerians learned slowly how to deal with walled cities. Attacking them, they tended to continue to send men against the walls until the defenders were too few to hold. Holding them, they usually left a few men inside, preferring to meet the attacking armies outside and crush their armies in open battle. The Hygerian War by Randall of Aventir. In the morning, a section of the wall had fallen, about a width of a small door. While the army was taking its places, the great catapult continued to cast its missiles. Even as they watched, another great piece, 5 feet in width, fell away, and more rock crumbled down before the engine was prepared to cast its next stone. By the time the host was assembled and orders passed, there was a gap about 20 feet in the wall, with the remains of the wall standing no higher than 4 feet at the highest point. Rourke looked at the host and grinned. It was still rather a tatterdemalion army, with the bulk of arms and armor captured from the Hygerians. They were more now, and they still presented the look of a chance-gathered mob. There were even a great number who had no armor at all, and were armed only with a bundle of light throwing spears and a dirk. But they too would have a part to play. Rourke strolled over to Connell, where he joined with the 200 men chosen to follow him. 3 light catapults were being moved into position in order to shoot over the heads of the attackers. Rourke spoke to the prince. Walls crack and crumble. See the white dust rise, and now the dragon of Elsban flies. Connell answered, smiling. Behold, once more the trumpet calls. Forward, then, through the broken wall. Rourke withdrew, casting a quick eye over Connell's 200 men. They were, for the most part, young men, fierce and eager, and he felt a sadness for which he could find no reason. Baran spoke suddenly at his elbow. They are young, and the fire burns fiercely. But who of them will remain to tell their grandchildren of this day? As Connell drew his sword, the trumpet sounded. The 3 catapults began to launch their missiles one at a time. They were not so difficult to reload as the great one which had battered down the wall. Therefore, though they fired swiftly, one was always ready to loose. 100 archers moved in formation behind Connell's men. As they drew within range, they began to loose their arrows. Even with this support, Connell's detachment lost several men to arrows and javelins from the wall. And as they began to clamber over the rubble in the breach, more arrows and javelins came from behind it. Then the last of them disappeared into the city. Clearly the Hygerians had been unable to mount an effective opposition in the breach, but from the noise within, the battle was becoming harder. Rourke signaled to Artir, who took 500 men forward with 20 ladders. They did not catch the Hygerians by surprise, nor had they expected to. But it drew men away who would otherwise have been able to hinder Connell's force inside. Rourke watched as the battle hung in the balance for what seemed to be a terrible length of time. Artir's small foothold on the wall remained small, there being room there for only limited numbers, and the Hygerians were attacking them with fierce determination. It was no longer possible to make any guesses at the state of the battle within, where Connell sought the gates, but Rourke was ready to make his choice. He looked at Baran, who was watching Artir's men on the wall, furrowing in deep concentration, as though by willing it he could cause them to clear the defenders from the wall. In a moment, the guardian said, we must move. Artir is making no headway, though he is drawing them off as we planned. Either Connell will open the gate for us and we will enter that way, or we will go over the breach to rescue Connell. Even as he spoke these last words, the gates began to move. Drawing the sword, he called out to those following him, For the king! And led them at a run toward the gates. As they swept into the city, Connell met them. His right arm was gashed from wrist to elbow, and he was lightly wounded on the right thigh, just above the knee. He grinned at Rourke. Well, my friend, will you join us on our stroll through this town? Yes, indeed. They advanced swiftly, passing through the remnants of the 200 men who had followed Connell and now fought in a semicircle at the gateway. There were 4 streets converging on the gate. Rourke would take the warriors down the main street along with what remained of Connell's force. The forces which were even now coming through the gate behind the warriors would divide up to take the others. A little way down the main street, the Hygerians counterattacked. In the midst of their rush, some stopped to hurl javelins while the rest continued their charge. Throwing themselves upon the Elsban front rank, they broke it. It cost them heavily, but in a moment the survivors of the front rank were fighting for their lives, surrounded by Hygerians. They tried to break the second rank as well, but failed. Connell and Rourke, among the survivors of the front rank, were fighting back to back for a time, facing what seemed to be a tossing sea of spears, swords, and axes. Then the second rank of the warriors, advancing steadily, passed around them, forcing the Hygerians back. Connell and Rorik, leaning on their swords, grinned at each other. From that moment, the Asbelinian attack was no longer in doubt. The Hygerians had been stretched to hold the breach and the wall, and the loss of the gate made it that much more difficult. But they continued to fight with their customary stubbornness, leaving no yard of cobblestone uncontested. The end of it was much like the end of the battle for Orden. Though here, the hostages who had been taken from among the leading citizens were guarded by men with orders to slay them if any rising seemed about to begin. When the people rose, therefore, they first rescued the hostages, though 17 of the 50 of them were slain. By then, though, the captive population were raging among their captors. Of the 500 who had held the city, over 300 died, 30 surrendered, and the rest managed to flee. In a red sunset, Hardinian returned to its owners. Okay, so there are a lot of short chapters, but they're good. Anyway, that is all for tonight. I will be back again tomorrow with another chapter. And thank you, all of you, for tuning in and watching the previous episodes. Thank you so much. And I will talk to you all again really soon. Have a good night.